Welcome back to the Bob Fu Report. Today I want to talk about the Olympics and human rights. These issues are very, very important now because we know in early February, the Beijing city will host the Winter Olympics. This is the second time Beijing was awarded an Olympics. In 2008, before Beijing was granted to host the Summer Olympics, the human rights situation in China was already very, very bad. Facing an international outcry, both the International Olympics Committee and the Chinese Communist government actually made a pledge to the international community, saying that by hosting the Summer Olympics in Beijing, the human rights will be improved in China. The world found only a year later, on December 25th of 2009, Christmas Day, the Chinese Communist regime sentenced Dr. Liu Xiaobo an 11-year imprisonment for subversion of state power, simply because he helped draft a Charter 08, basically calling for China to abide with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and other international human rights norms. The Charter was not really calling for overthrowing the communist regime. It only called the Chinese regime to abide its own international pledge that they signed. And yet, on a Christmas trial and verdict, later on in the years after that, the Chinese Communist Party ironically, cruelly make every Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, instead of a day to celebrate the birth of a Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, marking that day as a day of cruel criminal sentence of those peaceful protesters for freedom, these pastors who are celebrating Christmas, and those political dissidents who are just asking for freedom, for democratic reforms. I was there at Norway, at the Oslo City Hall, where every year the Nobel Peace Committee honored and delivered the Nobel Peace prize. As I was sitting, I remember on the 10th row from the front platform with the committee chairman, with other foreign dignitaries, and Liu Xiaobo, Dr. Liu Xiaobo, was in the cold prison in Liaoning province, northeast of China, perhaps the coldest place nearby Siberia. And the Nobel Peace Committee left an empty chair with the trophy, with the award paper laid on that empty chair. And now, Beijing was awarded another Olympics when the whole world knows, and you know that too, friends, the religious persecution, the human rights violation, the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, all the major human rights indexes has become the worst since Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution, especially under this brutal dictator, tyrant, President Xi Jinping in the past 9 years. Can we expect Xi Jinping will improve its human rights record after February 2022, after this expected gigantic propaganda show in the city of Beijing, showing how powerful, how prosperous, how united, how peaceful, how great the Chinese Communist Party and its managed party state, China, after 2 years devastation to the whole world of unleashing this Wuhan virus and plaguing the whole world. Well, history seems repeating itself. Remember in 1936, it was Hitler's Nazi Germany. During its, on the eve of its military invasion, the International Olympic Committee awarded Berlin as the hosting city of the Olympics. And the whole world know how Hitler used that Olympic platform, spreading its hatred ideology against the Jews, and beginning the chapter of the horrific genocide in its propaganda about how great the Nazi Germany was. Only the word found 3 years later, the emboldened Nazi Germany went on, made an invasion, a military invasion to Poland in 1939. So now we know Hitler, or Chairman Mao Jr. Xi Jinping, is recognized acknowledged by many countries, including the United States of America, including an independent Uyghur genocide tribunal based in London, made its decisive, credible ruling after 1.5 years public hearings of witnesses, experts. The world concluded that President Xi Jinping and his regime has committed genocide, crime against humanity, by putting between 1 to 3 million ethnic Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Muslims, and Christians alike, and even some Han Chinese Christians, are in the modern-day concentration camp. In addition of concentration camps and genocide, and the democratic, free Republic of China, Taiwan, is facing a credible, almost inevitable military threat by President Xi Jinping and his communist regime. Are we ready for another repeat of 1936 to 1939? Some experts already predicted it's not a if, but when President Xi will order a military invasion against Taiwan. Some say 1 year, some say 3 years. I heard a top U.S. military expert projected within 6 years. Within 6 years. So this crazy regime led by this tyrant Xi Jinping could launch that anytime. Is the world prepared to face another repeat of history? Some countries have their conscience woken up. The United States of America, and so far at least 5 or other countries, including Britain, Australia, Canada, and the Baltic country Lithuania, they all announced a diplomatic boycott, which means they won't send any diplomats or head of states to attend the Olympics. Other countries, including New Zealand, chose a kind of a boycott or non-boycott boycotting. Basically, they said, we just not going to send our officials, but not because of human rights, not because of genocide in China, not because of COVID. The restriction quarantine policy makes it harder to travel to China, unfortunately including Japan. They follow the so-called New Zealand model. And South Korea, a neighboring country of China, their president was pretty blunt, at least was very honest, by declaring they won't engage the diplomatic boycott because China is their big brother neighbor. They want to make peace with China. They themselves don't want to become Taiwan. That's, the President Jin, would not, of course, pronounce the last sentence as I said. I just paraphrased what he said. And the most disgusting thing, I think, is done by France. France. Once the country actually led the whole Western world as a champion for human rights, for civil rights, for freedom. And their president used the most ridiculous excuse by declaring, well, we couldn't boycott, and we shouldn't boycott the Olympics, and it will not help. And unfortunately, our friend Israel also joined the choir, refusing to boycott. Israel, the Jewish country, are you still remembering what happened to your people under Hitler's Nazi Germany? Are these 6 million Jews died in vain? France and French president, he said, I quote, well, boycott for Olympics won't help the change the political system. It won't help, he said. He joined the President Bach of IOC, basically, who share the same sentiment. Come on. I mean, the Olympics, you can maybe, have a good excuse to send the athletes to go. But do you think Xi Jinping just treat Olympics as a purely a sports, a game? It's nothing but a political game. It's for Xi Jinping. This is a show, a political show of his communism ideology, and it's a dictatorship. It's glorification of the so-called China model, the debt diplomacy to Asia, Africa, Europe. And President Bach, we know what you said. You said expectation that the games can change the political system of a country are exaggerated. Well, nobody actually even claim the Olympic can be used or as a vehicle for political, essential political system change. But when a genocide, when an internationally recognized crime against humanity, when people, women like Guzira, suffered the sexual abuse, and eyewitnessing hundreds of thousands of women are suffering right now, including next in February 2022, when you, President Bach, are celebrating with the Communist Party, when you're toasting with President Xi Jinping in the Great Hall of the People, not really the people, the Great Hall of the genocide Communist Party leaders, young girls, ladies like Gozera, many others. They're suffering a government regime systematically organized forced prostitution inside these labor camps. Many thousands had been already vanished, died, tortured, massively abused in this documented over 380 modern concentration camps. How can you, with a good conscience, drink the Maltais, the wine, the champagne? I would even ask those athletes, although you practiced for the past 2 years to really compete in the Olympics, and yet, please, when you are there competing, if you decide to go, I prefer you not going, to make a point that you chose to stand in solidarity with the suffering, the abused, the oppressed, the victims of genocide. But if you did go, please use every occasion, every opportunity, every gesture to register your solidarity with the victims, your solidarity with freedom, and your displeasure, your opposition to this communist, brutal tyrant and the digital authoritarianism, the totalitarian regime led by the Communist Party. And those who are planning to spend billions or hundreds of millions to sponsor, like NBC, Universal, like Nike, like Coca-Cola. Think about this. You are sponsoring a genocide Olympics. Blood are really on your company's logo, on your hands. You are enabling, empowering, supporting the genocide regime. Continue, actually, with more money, with more glorification for this bloody game. Can you just pause a little moment at midnight? Nike, the CEO, the leaders, sponsors, advertisers, to think about this. Maybe you can at least, you said, oh, I signed a contract. Okay. Have you spoken up? Have you even mentioned about Pastor Wang Yi, 7 years imprisonment on Christmas Eve, 2020? How about Pastor Zhang Cao? Actually, Pastor Wang Yi is 9 years. Pastor Zhang Cao, Chinese American, 7 years. And Sister Zhang, 12 years for having an offering box, tithing offering in her church. And many others. Lawyer Gao Zhisheng, enforced disappearance for over 4 years. And Zhang Haitao from Xinjiang, 19 years for tweeting and WeChatting, sending just a freedom of expression. 200 messages. 19 years imprisonment. In the past 2 years, not a single family is allowed to have a visitation. Not even virtually, not even a phone call. How about another Christian citizen journalist, John Dan, who was sentenced to 4 years for whistleblowing the COVID-19 when she went to Wuhan and started reporting. And she is dying. She is dying. So, as we are just reporting, I'm talking about this, we learned, thankfully, the U.S. Congress stood up by passing the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act for the first time with a bill that would forbid any imports or any products who cannot be verified as a product of forced labor genocide. And President Biden has promised to sign it into law. We're praying and hoping we can all hold these companies with their blood in their hands accountable to implement this law. Well, my appeal to those brothers and sisters, those community of faith, that at this holiday season, let's remember those who are bonded, who are in prison, as if we are bonded together, as we are their fellow prisoners with them. Let's continue to pray. The Prince of Peace and His love and justice will prevail in that land of China one day, sooner or later. May God bless all of you.